Hey guys, Brox here, doing a very fast update video on my final choice heading into Diablo 4 tomorrow. The astute of you may have realized that I never actually put together the video on my Hoda Barb. Um, when I was discussing in my Pulverized Druid video that I was in between Poison Trap Rogue, Pulverized Druid, and my Hoda Barb, and I was going to put a build guide out for the Hoda Barb. I never got around to it, largely because after making the Pulverized Druid video, I had come to the conclusion that that was the direction I was going to go. Why? Truthfully, it's because Triple Shout just seems like it's something I don't want to be doing. Um, in the end, I think Hoda Barb is going to be faster than Pulverized Druid. I think it's going to be more efficient than Pulverized Druid, just largely because you can get Ancestral Force in Skull's Glen in Act 2 very quickly, and you can get the build online very quickly. However, um, the gameplay portion of it, of just constantly hitting 3 keys for hours, right? Like 12 to 16 hours straight, every second hitting all 3 keys. I don't want to play a tedious build like that. I think I mentioned in one of my build guides that the best builds that I enjoy are builds where I don't have to have high attacks per minute or high actions per minute. I love getting builds like Righteous Fire in Path of Exile, where it's literally the damage source is happening at all the time, and I'm just controlling my character through the map to collect loot. Like, to me, that's the fun side of ARPGs, or to make a build where I'm literally just holding down one button and that button is doing the majority of my damage. An example of this is my last Epoch build, which I'll throw a quick clip in. Where I made it based around Mana Strike, and it's literally just Mana Striking as fast as possible, and everything kind of feeds that concept, feeds that Mana Strike. So that's what I enjoy. I thought Hoda could be very similar to that. I love playing Hoda. I think Hoda is a very fun ability, and it was a very tough decision. It's just in the end game when the shout cooldown is literally 1 second per shout, I just don't want to be slamming 3 keys endlessly within 1 second of each other for 12 to 16 straight hours. That to me is going to be extremely tedious gameplay. So I'm not looking forward to doing that. So I had made the decision that I am going to play a Pulverized Druid. So I'm going to play a Pulverized Druid for the majority of the game. I'm going to pray for the life of me that RNG blesses me at some point with a Shockwave aspect, because otherwise it's going to be a miserable experience. I'm probably going to start early game as Shred and just try to get through the early game as fast as possible and get into the mid game where I can get some of these other codex powers. I think this entire build is codex except for shockwave, so really we're hunting a shockwave aspect. As soon as we get the shockwave aspect, we're going to put that on our amulet, not our weapon, so we can still get the 1.5 multiplier, and it will live on that amulet until I have multiple other copies of shockwave. So when I have like 2, 3, 4 of them, and I can afford to use one on a two-handed weapon, I will then do so. But the first one I get will immediately go on to whatever amulet I'm wearing, and that amulet will live with me for that point forward, no matter what. If it's like a level 30 amulet when I get it, I will wear that sucker all the way through level 70 until I have multiple copies of Shockwave that I can put on a two-handed weapon and then upgrade my amulet and then go through that cycle again. So that's the current plan. I did change this build quite a bit as I've put a lot more time into it. One of the big changes is the Paragon boarding. Is I spent hours and hours on this. So this is a 6 glyph, 3 legendary node board. All glyphs have maximum value. Even this top glyph that doesn't look like it does, it actually does. So this is going to be what I'm going to be working on for the large majority, but it's not going to be my end game build. So this build has a finite limit to me, and that finite limit is probably going to be somewhere around Nightmare Dungeon 50, 60 in tiers. And the moment I get this build, which is Storm Werewolf Online, which requires me to get the unique Tempest Roar, I will be switching over to this build, which is a Storm Werewolf build, largely because this has a much higher ceiling cap of damage than Pulverize does. Pulverize will be able to probably clear the entire game. It's probably great, but going for the absolute most damage possible, we will be switching over to this Storm Werewolf build. This is already fully spec'd out and ready to go. So skill tree, Paragon. This has 4 legendary nodes, 5 glyphs, fully maxed out for efficiency and damage. Um, and that's what we're going to be working on for Diablo 4. So we're going Druid. We're going to start Shred until we get a Shockwave aspect. As soon as we get a Shockwave aspect, we're going full Pulverize. Pulverize for like 80 to 90% of the game. As soon as we get a Tempest Roar, we're switching over to Storm Werewolf, and we will be playing that at the end game. Another thing that is also something I've waffled on, but kind of coming to a slow decision on, is playing softcore or hardcore. I was not going to play hardcore. I had no interest in playing hardcore. However, in a lot of the current released insider info of the build that we will be launching on, um, shows me that the game doesn't look that hard. There's very little that I saw from any of the videos that people were submitting that looks like it could kill you if you're obviously playing with awareness. None of the dungeons looked hard. None of the dungeon bosses looked hard. None of the story content past the mom fight, which I think is going to be the most complicated fight in the game for druids and barbs specifically, because it's very tedious for melee classes. But I think as soon as if you can get by the mom fight without dying, which is arguably the thing I'm most worried about if I go hardcore, then I think nothing's going to kill you to level 100. I don't think anything's going to have the ability to, just because you're just going to be so tanky. Like if you get everything online, you get everything for Pulverized Druid from the Codex, and you get a Shockwave aspect, I don't think you're going to die. So I'm considering going hardcore just to see if I can be one of the first 1,000. I do think it's possible, so I'm gonna give it a shot. If I die or something, annoys me, I'll just go to softcore and enjoy the game as I was intending to do so. But outside of that, that's the plans. I do want to give 3 shout outs. Shout out number 1 is to Sanctum. Sanctum is the one who did a lot of the heavy lifting for this Storm Werewolf build. I just came in and changed it for my liking and made some changes that I talked to Sanctum about. And I think he modified his build a little bit from some of the stuff that I gave him considerations on. But the biggest thing between Sanctum's build and my build is I'm taking Debilitating Roar. He doesn't like this skill. I think it's going to be mandatory. So that's one of the big changes there. And then, of course, our Paragon boards are slightly different. I moved some of his glyphs around, and then we made some changes to the aspects. But all in all, this is heavily Sanctum's build, so I want to give him a quick shout out. I also want to give Boiler from Maxroll on the Druid side of the Maxroll team a shout out. He and I in DMs and we had an actual conversation, kind of talk through a lot of this stuff. He likes EM Pulverize or Earth and Might Pulverize. I'm not a huge fan, so I'm going a slightly different route where I don't take Earth and Might, I take Earth Sign Strength, just because I like consistent damage and I don't want to be trapped on a solo target boss hoping that Earth and Might procs. So the slight variance there, but he and I went through a lot of just different things, and probably the biggest thing that he helped me with was the Paragon board and understanding and being a second pair of eyes to little things, like just little spots where I lost like a point here or a point there, that I re-optimized and got a few more points of damage. So wanted to give Boiler a shout out. I wanted to give Cromer a shout out for the Poison Trap Rogue build. I know I put him in the comments, but he deserves a mention in the actual videos. He and I spent a bunch of time talking about Poison Trap Rogue and how it could be super damage and how it could work. And I still think Poison Trap Rogue is probably going to be an extremely, extremely powerful build for rogues. Even though Twisted Blade still looks absolutely busted from endgame footage that we saw. So, um, those guys deserve it. Those guys deserve a lot of praise. There was some other people in Woody's Druid channel as I was making these changes and adjustments and looking through these builds that obviously were of some help. So for all the guys in the Woody Druid channel, props to you guys. A lot of this couldn't have been done without getting some questions answered. There's still some things up in the air, but we'll figure that out as we go. But yeah, this is what I'm going to be doing for Diablo 4. Thanks, guys.